So I'm Katharina.
And I'm Sylvia. Hi.
Hi, and we are both running the space, Alpha Nova and Gallery Futura. And the space already exists for more than 30 years, and it was initiated by activists of the Women Peace movement in former West Berlin. And they had the idea to create a space which interlinks activism and art stuff, and providing a platform, especially for women artists, to present their works and their ideas in a very male-dominated field. And after 25 years, generational change, let's say, was initiated by my former colleague Anne Kohl and me. We overtook the gallery as new art directors from this elderly generation of women who started the project. And we moved the project to this space where we are now, at Fluggraben, on the border between Treptow and Kreuzberg. And we also changed the direction, the curatorial conception a bit, let's say. So before it was more a space which really tried to promote women artists in their professional career, and we started to rethink again what could a feminist space be, and a feminist conception of curatorial practices. So this was more or less a starting, and then we have.
I mean, we're like mostly we're non-commercial, so it's like not like a classical gallery where you where you represent artists. So like our organization is then like more like a project space, I would say, because there's like no artists we represent on like a regular basis. We're not like selling artworks, or we don't exist in order to sell artworks. And I would say like this gallery is really special but like we still have a state funding, so we're still like funded by the Berlin Senate. And what makes it special is also, I would say, that we represent, or like we show artists and female artists from like a really early stage on in their careers, and we're also like really approachable. So
and I think it was. So for us it was always important to highlight certain topics, gender-related, gender-political, queer topics, and also issues which are connected to decolonial perspectives and anti-racist perspectives. But on the one hand, or on the other hand, we will always try to keep a discussion on what feminist curatorial practice can be, like about different forms of communication, collaborations, what could solidarity practice be in this concept, what could it mean in this context, how can we share resources in a more fairer way, let's say. Also to reflect on our own positions as white academic women running this art space, and what kind of exclusions we do by ourselves, let's say, when we choose certain topics and invite certain people to collaborate. So all these questions, how can we become a more inclusive space, let's say, for more people, more diverse, let's say. We had, for example, one project which we started in 2015. It calls Precarious Art, and Protest and Resistance. And for this project we worked together with an artist, with artist and curator Stacey C.C. Graham, who's also activist in the Black Lives Matter movement. And with her together, we developed a project which really addresses the everyday racism, structural racism, and sexism in the Berlin art establishment, or art world, let's say, in which especially Black women artists and those of color are not really represented or doesn't feel represented. And it was about finding strategies for Black women artists and artists of color to counteract these very white and male-dominated structures. And for this project, we had an exhibition here with Karina Griffith, Lera Toshadi, and Melody Laverne-Betancourt. And those three artists, for example, they overtook the space and painted everything black. And it was really for the first time this very white cube, let's say, became a black cube. And one of the very long walls, they created a common work which called The Company We Keep. And in a internal performance, let's say, the three artists wrote the whole wall with names of Black female artists, activists, people who are who made an inspiration for their lives or who were really important for their own biographies, let's say, which empowered them or inspired them. And during this, let's say, performative act, they told each other about the different people who they written down on the wall. So it was the whole wall. In the end, was full with names like whatever. So Angela Davis was, of course, someone who's really famous, but there were also names of, let's say, the grandmother of one of the artists who really was an important person for her, let's say. And they told each other the stories of these different women. So it was an act of empowerment itself for them to tell the others about these persons and also make them visible as persons, let's say, as people who are usually maybe are not so visible in the hegemonial historiography, or let's say. So this was, for example, one really interesting piece and also an interesting process to work and also to offer the space to this artist and just give also this guy. Of course we were initiating it, but it was really something that then developed by itself.
I was not part of the project, but I remember reading about it, and even like the artist wrote the statement or like the press text on their own, right? Because it was like kind of part of the project, like, okay, it's not the curators or like the people who invited them, like the white space writing about Black art, but like kind of writing about themselves. I really like that fact, because it's really like taking it to another step, not only inviting people, but like really giving them space. It's like, taking a step back and like letting other people to step in.
And this is also something, this is, let's say, our agenda, that sometimes we think in different topics or whatever issues we would like to develop further, and then we invite certain people to collaborate for it, but we also offer the space to other curators or artists to really do their own agenda here. So Ribolschi said Decolonial and Feminist Perspectives on 68 was a project that included a series with events, and it was initiated by District, another feminist queer feminist art space here in Berlin, and us, and in collaboration with a lot of other artists, curators, authors, and so on. And the idea was to take this opportunity of this, let's say, 50th birthday of 68. This was last year in 2019, to to have a look back and to this time and the narratives that are created about these times, and which are really obvious. That's a story. Just sorry. So it was really, when you look back to these narratives, or when you talk about 68 and the movements and activist movements that are somehow connected to it, and it becomes really obvious that it's again just only some perspectives are in consideration or in the, let's say, in the public discourse, and others are definitely not. So, and this project was exactly about these other perspectives, other positions of, for example, people of color, of Jewish artists, of anti-colonial and migrant perspectives, and we designed a kind of series with events like performances, lectures, panel discussions, and film presentations from all these, and trying to gather all these perspectives and positions of people who are still not included into this hegemonial narrative about this time and about this big, this revolutionary idea about 68.
Now there's like much more decolonial perspectives, but like I think it's like something that happens recently, especially in the art world. And I was just like talking to friends about this. There's especially, I don't know, younger, like people in their mid-20s right now in Berlin are also like much more aware than, I don't know, maybe other people were, or like even like I was like 10 years ago.
Maybe I think it's again something that maybe it already existed for years, that Afro-German women or people were gathering, creating, making, really also things which were really important for the community, but also for the visibility. But I think in the last years it became more like more mainstream, also in the art world, to include these perspectives.
I mean, there was like outcries now, you know, when you have like one exhibition space in Berlin did a show about like Afrofuturism and did not include like any person of color. This is like something that like there would like have never been like outrage and like criticism to that, I'm sure, like 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So we can definitely see, even though there was maybe in some tiny little like some groups, there was like kind of the awareness. But the awareness we have now that you cannot do a show or like an art exhibition or a program dealing with black futurism when you don't include any like black or people of color. This is just like, and like people are actually like protesting against it and writing to the institutions. This is something I think that would have not like been the case 10 or 5 years ago even. Or maybe 5 years ago, yes, but not 10 years ago.
But also, for example, for the situation for women artists, I mean, it's still much more precarious than for male artists, and still it's not, we are far away from equality for male and female artists in the art world, but it's still like, so I think nowadays, as someone who are doing, let's say in a bigger institution, you are doing an exhibition with just male artists, you would definitely have to somehow
explain, right?
Explain. So
yourself.
You would be definitely, putting it in public and say you have to explain it. So, and I think a couple of years ago it was still kind of normal, maybe just to show just six male artists because whatever, without any explanation. And this, I think something is changing, so in this field and also in other fields of inequality.
So the exhibition we're sitting in right now is called A Feminist Perspective for Berlin Today. How could a non-sexist city look like? And it's an exhibition that is part of a larger program, or like the second part of a series called Feminist Housing, Her Stories, Berlin, Bauhaus and Beyond. And the exhibition consists of 6 artistic works that we selected after an open call, and it also consists of a mapping that students did from the TU, from the Technical University here in Berlin, like architecture and urban studies students, and also students from the UDK, from the University of the Arts. And so the artistic works we see all deal with sometimes utopian ideas, how a feminist city or like a non-sexist city should look like, and some of them are more like pointing the fingers or like their finger on what is actually like right now going wrong. For example, naming or addressing street harassment and the lack of maybe care work and the lack of safety or the feeling of safety when you walk home at night. And the mapping itself, it combines or locates all the artistic works in a Berlin map and connects it to several queer, feminist and emancipatory spaces and places in the city. But it also created a narrative of like a feminist festival taking place in Berlin for 3 days in 2049. And so it creates like an utopia where we have, for example, men health care centers where men can get contraceptions or like the pill or something like this, where we have affordable housing, not only outside the ring but also like inside the ring. And affordable does not only like mean or like feminist housing where there's care possibilities or like care connections and care networks where you don't have to maybe bring your children or like the elderly somewhere far away where you live and where you work. And in this feminist map of 2049 there is also much more representation of women in public spaces when it comes to, I don't know, city, like street names, and there's like better ways of mobility, so where you can ride your bike almost everywhere and easily. So all these things are reflected in this exhibition. I mean, I would say like my idea of a feminist utopia is obviously intersectional because we're talking about this. Is also like a utopia, I think, where like gender and sexuality doesn't play any role anymore, where like, and race obviously as well, and disability and sizeism and beauty standards and whatever you want to call it. And it's a space, or it's like a space where bodies can move freely and without fear. What else?
I think definitely affordable housing for everyone and ways of living collectively together, also individual, so depending on the different needs of the people. So where you can work collectively or individually, so also depending on the different needs of people. So everything should be really ausgerichtet sein. So.
Constructed for? I don't know.
Yeah. So okay, Scott.
I'm more about like an utopia. I mean, I would like question the concept of work in general, because like when I'm reading Radical, I would kind of like there would like be no capitalist system that is like exploiting I don't know whom and like celebrating or like glorification of busyness is just like nothing that is existent in like feminist utopia. And there's no like ideas of I don't know, what does it mean to be like to function? What does it mean to be productive in a feminist utopia? I think we still like need to figure this out, but it would be definitely different than now. And like good character traits where it would not be like a lot of ones we have now in a capitalist society that is like still taking so-called stereotypical male ideas like strength and force and whatever. This like kind of things will not be regarded as good as they are now, but like more compassion, empathy, solidarity. So I'm just like kind of this utopia could go on forever.
Yeah, a mindful society, definitely.